Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to see so many people out to hear about a topic that's really, really important, and it's going to be crucially important to Memphis in the years to come. Good evening, I'm Bob Faulkner. I'm president of the Community Foundation of Greater Memphis. For several years now, we've been producing timely programming on the issues that are of the greatest importance to our community. When we had our annual meeting, we asked our donors, which you all represent, what you wanted to hear more about. And the two top issues that came out of that in May were justice and safety. So here we are. The purpose of these important discussions is to examine the issues themselves, but more importantly, to be a call to action, to inspire our donors and our friends to take appropriate steps informed by what they hear. Together, as 1,200 individuals and families that care about and care enough to invest in our community, the Community Foundation and its donors have a huge positive impact on Memphis and the Mid-South, measured literally in the hundreds of millions of dollars annually. While most grants made through the Community Foundation are advised by the people and organizations who establish individual funds here, for the past 30 years, the Forever Funds, through the investment of donors like you and the guidance of community volunteers, some of whom are also in the room, have addressed the most pressing needs in our community and supported the creation of innovative, transformative solutions in West Tennessee, Eastern Arkansas, and Northern Mississippi. Forums like this one also serve to inform the decisions of our community volunteers, driving positive collective impact through the Forever Funds. So we meet tonight at a time when crime has measurably, and perhaps even more painfully, perceptibly, been on the rise in Memphis. The Memphis Police Department's own statistics, some of which just came out in the last week or two, still continue to show that. Citizens, as well as leaders in our own recent elections, have been calling for more and better policing. But in the face of this, there have been recurring and at times extreme examples of excesses on the part of law enforcement, regrettably, a few of them on our own streets. For us, these issues climaxed in July when the Department of Justice announced that it would be launching a civil pattern of practice investigation into the City of Memphis and the Memphis Police Department. That sounds like a big deal, but what does all of that mean? Well, tonight's panel aims to shed light on the investigation's implications and its significance for Memphis, and we hope that this is the first of these conversations that we'll have as the investigation matures and develops. Now, in this polarized political environment, our intent here is not to take any particular stance on the advisability or on the desired outcomes of the DOJ's investigation. We simply want to understand what the investigation is about. The issues of crime and its solutions are incredibly complex. There are no easy answers, despite what you might hear on a soundbite on a TV commercial. Policing gets a lot, if not most of the attention locally as a response to crime. And it is a very important component, as you'll hear from our guests tonight. But policing in a culturally diverse community saddled with generations of deep poverty is more difficult, and the results can certainly be problematic. While the police department is theoretically set up to solve problems, their day-to-day practices can also create deep distrust if they're not carried out carefully and sensitively. And policing is only one component of the solutions to the challenges that we face. Public safety, as the best of our leaders have tried to make clear, is as much about literacy and job opportunities and public spaces and schools and healthcare, to name just a few, as it is about policing. Again, policing is important, but in some cases, additional checks are appropriate and helpful. Over the past decade, the Department of Justice has engaged in many communities in pattern and practice investigations. The department currently has ongoing investigations working in Phoenix, New York City, and Oklahoma City, among others, and has recently completed investigations in Louisville and Minneapolis. You'll hear a lot about Cincinnati tonight, I think, and their work in Cincinnati lasted over 2 decades. The point, though, is that in each case, the cities involved have learned a lot about themselves and about what it takes to make their cities safer. We can benefit from that experience without a doubt. This investigation has to be an opportunity for us to get better and to build a public safety system that is both effective and trusted. So we put together an amazing panel for you tonight, which you'll be just amazed to hear from, with speakers who have firsthand knowledge on exactly what a pattern or practice investigation is all about, And since you didn't come to hear me, I'll turn it over directly to our moderator, Josh Spickler, the Executive Director of Just City, to get us started and do introductions.
Thanks so much, Bob. Really appreciate you hosting us here at the Community Foundation. Special thanks to Sutton Mora for working so closely with us to produce what I hope is an informative evening. Just so you know where we're going, I hope to spend 45 minutes or so chatting with Iris and Richard, and leave some time at the end for some questions from the audience. I'm going to try to start as if we don't know what a pattern or practice investigation is, and by the time we're finished tonight, we will, and hopefully we'll know what it can mean for our community. At Just City, if you're not familiar, we are very concerned with these issues. We're very concerned with a justice system that fails far too often, and I think what we've seen and the numbers that we continue to hear are just more evidence that this system does not protect us in the way that we deserve. It doesn't protect any of our communities in the way that we deserve, and I think it's important when we talk about these issues to talk about it in terms of every community, because this town has a lot of people who struggle with this issue in ways that many of us can't imagine. And so I hope we'll get into that tonight. At Just City, we do things mostly in the courts and with the jails, but policing is the front of all of that. The way that our community, the way that the people who we empower to go out and enforce those laws is vital. And I think we'll hear tonight about how well that can work and how much better we can do it as a community. I don't think there's any doubt that we've got work to do. So you will hear a lot about Cincinnati. I'm not going to go much longer, but both of these folks have a lot of experience in that town. And our first guest, Iris Roley, comes to us directly from there today, down the interstate in a car with her family. And instead of reading bios, I think I'm going to let each of them spend a minute or two to tell us why we invited them to drive down the highway to Memphis, Tennessee, and talk about pattern or practice investigations. So Iris Roley, please go first.
All right. Hello. Can you guys hear me? Because I can talk real loud, I think sometimes. Hello? Is that better?
There it is.
All right, great. So I think I deserve more than a moment because I've been on the highway.
Indeed.
And oftentimes, when community's voice is lifted up, sometimes we're only given a moment. And so I demand and command more than moments of my time because I've been given a lot of moments to Cincinnati. My name is Iris Roley, and I am married to this wonderful gentleman that's sitting in the front row, Mr. Jesse Roley, who is also a member of the Cincinnati Black United Front. But before that, we are owners of Rose Show and Awards and Graphics, the largest black laser engraving company in the Midwest. So as I talk about my journey and who I am, I want you to hearken that back to me sleeping with the owner. I knew that would wake you all up. Come on. You're grown, right? Because this is serious work. When you're an active taxpayer, such as myself, oftentimes having a job is difficult, especially when your skin is melanated like mine. But I know I'm going to preach to the choir tonight because I believe that you all already know what I'm going to talk about. I can't tell you more about Memphis. That's your story to tell me. I came here just to give you some of my power, my super black woman power, to begin to do the right thing for black people in the city of Memphis. Now, I know that we're going to talk about patterns and practice and the DOJ investigation and what that looks like. But before we got to that process, we had to get to our community. There is work to be done in Memphis. But it starts at the very critical C level. And the critical C is the community. Now, I know that our cities are different, and what we did in Cincinnati is different. See, we sued the city, the police, and the FOP for racial profiling, along with the ACLU of Ohio. So we became the plaintiffs of the case, even though we were burdened with more police violence because police commit violence in and on community members. That's why we're here. Violence begets violence. I'm going to, in a series, because Josh has already given me the okay, that we're going to talk in stages about this work. I can't talk to you tonight about 22 years because I've compartmentalized myself into 3 lanes. There's the Iris Roley, that's the businesswoman. There's the Iris Roley, that's the mother, the grandmother, and soon to be 60 in 10 days.
Hey.
No applause needed, that's all right. But also Iris Roley as the community developer and the overseer of this process of what the collaborative agreement gave us. And that is the power that I want to give to you all, whether you're Black and in the community or non-Black in the community or of some other race or ethnicity. To empower yourselves to think right now, from this point forward, are you going to do the right thing? This is difficult. This work is not easy. Now, I know I'm looking cute here tonight because I got a little rest. I think about half an hour. We've been eating chicken and apples coming down because I fried some chicken wings last night, and that ain't no slight. That's because I love my sister and her husband. But you're looking at sacrifice. You're looking at losing a home. You're looking at losing a child into the system fighting for the correction of a system. You're looking at the boycotting of my business. You're looking at fighting with police unions and folk who don't believe change is necessary and or deservingly so for Black people. I had notes, y'all, because I had a lot to say. Let me thank the Community Foundation, Greater Memphis, for this facilitation of this gathering. I want to thank Josh and the team for talking with me over the weeks and getting me centered, because this work is a while ago for us. Someone said you're going to hear about Cincinnati in over 2 decades. No, we're still at the table. This is continuous improvement. There is no end. There is no end. So we need to be okay with that. There is no end. Every day there's a new problem. And the reason, and the only reason that I get to sit here today feeling somewhat good about the work, and we'll talk about our journey, because Mr. Jerome's and my journey, along with my husband's journey, started 21 years ago. This same process. But the work starts before. The sacrifices have been made. I don't know what greater sacrifice there is than a life. I almost didn't make Memphis because when Tyree Nichols happened, I think I lost my mind. I really did. And if you're in the room and you talk to me via the internet or the phone because we wanted to know how we could help Memphis get itself in order, I thank you for that. You were well received in Cincinnati. Cincinnati heard you. But the struggle that we went through to get there wasn't easy. We didn't just go to federal court and file a lawsuit. We were in the streets. We created the longest standing boycott in the history of boycotts on the Cincinnati travel and tourism. Ask Cincinnati what happened. Ask the philanthropic community what happened. Ask the business community what happened. When the likes of Bill Cosby and Prince and Mary J. Blige and the National Baptist Ministers Convention decide that they will not cross the line because Black life was valuable then. It's not just a term. It ain't a phrase, and it ain't a time and a year. It's always. So when you have those things occur, and you have to look at self and say, it is time that we do something different. I'm not saying it's utopia in the city of Cincinnati for Black people in the police and or some of the other communities that have issues with police. But what I will say, based off our journey, and we'll talk about that journey and how we came to the product, because our journey started with a work plan. And the work plan came from Black folk in the community. We collected over 400 stories to tell the stories about Blacks in the city of Cincinnati. We came into federal court with a 33-year history. We traced it back. We traced back the riots that previously had happened. We traced back the blue ribbon reports that sat on the shelf. We traced all that back. We actually studied every federal agreement before ours was signed. And we knew what we didn't want, and we knew what we did want. But we also knew that in order to change culture, you needed to come up with something that was going to help change the culture. So we can't talk about the work if we're not really going to try to nibble at where the issues really lie and reside and are able to grow and fester while citizens pay for it. Sounds like a form of slavery to me. I don't know. But I accepted it, and I came here because I am a mother of 3 strong black males, a grandmother of 6. We did lose a grandchild this year. Because people believe that when you care about your people and you're trying to change systems, that your whole life is dedicated to that. I don't get off at 5 o'clock. So I've spent many moments in this process for the past 22 years. And we do have some things that we can help show you our pathway, not trying to tell you to accept what we've done. Again, I just want to bring you the superpower. I want to hand you my cape. Because black women carry a lot. And we do a lot. I serve now in the role of consultant to the city manager on all things policing, collaborative agreement, and its refresh that we signed 5 years ago. To refresh the original goals, we asked our original monitoring team to come back and assess us. And the assessment wasn't pretty. It wasn't cute at all. As a matter of fact, Saul Green kicked our butts. But we have a work product. We have processes put in place. We have people who are committed to it. Again, doesn't mean that crime is not going to rise. If you read the agreement, and I didn't send it to you, Josh, for a reason, because I want people to take the time out to find out what it is. Because guess what you can have, Memphis? You can have police accountability and public safety all at the same time. One cannot live without the other. And we can talk further about that. My name is Iris Roley, and that's my story.
Thank you, Iris. Thank you so much. Richard, before you start, I'm going to ask you to give us a little bit of your bio and why we invited you down here, but then maybe move on into the very broad strokes of what a pattern or practice investigation is.
Sure. So again, my name is Richard Jerome, and I'm a civil rights lawyer. I do a lot of work on police accountability, and kind of my background is as follows. I was at the Justice Department for many years and worked very closely with the Attorney General, Janet Reno, in like 95 to 2001 on police accountability and police oversight, worked with the Civil Rights Division at the time on pattern or practice, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how that got started and what pattern or practice is. And actually worked as well with the police profession and the cops office and the Justice Department's bureaus that work with police departments and prosecutors and public defenders to try to figure out how to kind of develop a roadmap for police integrity and police accountability. I left Justice in 2000 and began work as a kind of consultant on police accountability and police oversight. And one of the projects that I got most involved in was in Cincinnati, where there was 2 different police reform efforts. There was a Justice Department pattern or practice investigation, and there was also what has been known as the collaborative agreement, which was based on a private class action that Iris told you about, that ended up a very broad set of stakeholders where the reforms in that collaborative agreement kind of went beyond what is usually involved in a Justice Department pattern or practice agreement. So I did that for about 6 years as the deputy monitor. Then after that, continued doing some work on police accountability, but ended up working for the Pew Charitable Trust in their public safety performance project, working with states basically on sentencing and corrections reform, trying to slow the growth in the prison population while advancing what was known as justice reinvestment, taking some funds, instead of building prisons, you can actually put money in on the front end and really build as well better systems for parole and probation. And then I was called up by the person who was appointed the monitor in the NYPD stop and frisk case and asked to be the deputy monitor in New York. So for the past 10 years, I've been the deputy monitor on the New York Police Department's stop and frisk cases. There's actually 3 large class actions that have been kind of brought together, and our job is to help the police department develop and implement the reforms and then report to the court on progress or lack thereof. So that's kind of how I got here, and in terms of kind of why I'm here, I think what I'd like to do is help kind of provide just a little bit of foundation for, what is a pattern or practice investigation, how does it go forward, what is generally the outcome. Usually there's either a settlement or in most cases a consent decree. What does that mean? What are the kinds of provisions that are in that consent decree? And then the question is, well, what can you expect out of that process? What does policing look like after a consent decree? Is there concern, as I know there often are concerns in jurisdictions about, well, if we move in this direction and we're requiring the police to do these additional efforts, will that mean that they'll be, police will be handcuffed and there's going to be de-policing and crime will go up? And I can tell you that the research actually shows that that is not the case, that in most of the police departments and in the jurisdictions where there has been a consent decree on policing, actually crime has gone down. I mean, a lot depends on the circumstances and the various years. During the pandemic, crime pretty much increased around the country. We're now seeing many cities and many states seeing a reduction in crime, and the question is, how do we get Memphis there? And how do we do that in a way that we can get both public safety and constitutional policing? And that's kind of...
Thank you, Richard. Iris, set the stage for us. As I understand it, the city mayor in Cincinnati requested the DOJ's involvement, but also you all filed a lawsuit, as we've referenced a couple of times. So things weren't great in Cincinnati more than 20 years ago. What does that mean? What did that look like? What was life like on the streets in Cincinnati before you all filed your lawsuit?
Wow. Josh, that's a great question. Because I think the response to police violence is why we hit the streets, and thus became the catalyst for the work, to be proactive about not allowing those situations to occur. So you go from mourning, it's almost as if it's like a death, and it is a death, but you have to quickly do business, right? So as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, as a sister, as an aunt to young black males, you got to pivot. So we had to give y'all our strategy. That's for community people in a closed meeting, but you have to be able to strategically plan your efforts to get to the goal. And what I will share in that strategic process is that we listened to the folk who had done it before us. And when we saw that there was dragging of the feet, when people said that they were committed to getting to the beginning to look at what does these things called accountability look like, because there are a multitude of things. So we took the effort that our mayor did as another one up, because it was either him or John Cranley, I think I'm on my 8th or 9th mayor, they filed an ordinance that said that Cincinnati police wouldn't do racial profile. I don't know if you remember this, Richard. I know my husband does. While we were filing in federal court. Now, we know that the city ordinance would not have as much power, would not have as much grip or expansion of what needed to be focused on. And we knew that the force would just go, it's just another city ordinance. So we saw that when our then Mayor Charlie Lucan called the DOJ an effort to circumvent our efforts. But in the end, at the end of the day, they utilized our data because we were already in the community collecting the data. We were able to be the narratives of our story. We were there. And so when they did come for us, the Cincinnati Black United Front, which had gotten the blessing of the community to go do this work, right? So when they came, it was, welcome. We got something for you.
Mm-hmm.
And what we expect back as taxpayers, and what we expect from the Department of Justice is just what Jerome said. We, not only were we becoming problem solvers, which is the foundation of our agreement, but we became pushers and believers of the process. So we were not stopping at the typical cookie cutter DOJ agreement. That's why we have the collaborative, which does give us more room to work alongside of the people that we were suing in federal court. It was an interesting time. It was a lot of, we fought a lot. We fought the first 3 years in these community meetings with the police. It was on. I learned how to cuss in those meetings. No, I knew before then, but so it was up and down for me. For a Black United Fronter, we were all over the place. But there was a bigger and a broader need and expectation of getting something done. And we knew that we could not allow another opportunity, or we could not allow another politician, or we could not allow another judge, we could not allow anybody, another police union president, another news reporter. Because as Richard Jerome just said, there are no reports to indicate that when you fight and create the processes to have police accountability, that crime is going to go up. If you read the agreement, the Cincinnati Collaborative Agreement, paragraph 13 gives us and lends us, I know I'm going to another question, so I'm just talking, do my thing.
It's okay. It's okay.
It tells you in the beginning, yes, we wanted police accountability, but we wanted public safety to be done fairly and equitably also. So that means looking at other things. The Greater Cincinnati Foundation in the year of 2001, Josh, and I need to say this to your funders and to the folk who are in the room, took a leap off the roof with the Cincinnati Black United Front. In 2001, it wasn't sexy going into federal court suing the police. That wasn't cute. That was problematic. And you are going into federal court and you're supporting the organization that's actually boycotting and shutting down the economics, the flow of tourism. The same reason we actually organized, the Cincinnati Black United Front came about because 14 of our 34 downtown restaurants decided that they were going to close during the music festival. Silly people. 65,000 people come into the city. It is the largest revenue-generating event in the city of Cincinnati, and it's been going on for 58 years. But simply because Black people attended, you're going to shut down? After you've gone to the city and you've asked for my tax dollar to improve your facade fixtures and to buy furniture and equipment? So we had deep-rooted issues, not just with police, but with the culture of the city of Cincinnati. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you, Iris. Richard, tell us where we are in Memphis right now. In July, the Department of Justice announced that they were launching a pattern or practice investigation. They've been here several times to listen. They go on listening tours. I believe they were here last week. Where are we, and what are the next steps for Memphis?
So just to start with, I think it's important to kind of lay out what is a pattern of practice investigation, where did it come from, and it actually comes from the 1994 Crime Act, which most people kind of equate with the cop's office and 100,000 cops on the street. It also provided an opportunity for, and the authority for, the Justice Department and the Attorney General to sue police departments, sheriff's departments, law enforcement agencies if they were engaging in a pattern or practice of unconstitutional behavior. And again, this is a civil lawsuit, so it's important to kind of distinguish this from a civil rights prosecution over an individual action, whether it's abuse, excessive force, shootings, unconstitutional stop and search. This is a civil lawsuit that basically is making the case that these are not individual problems. This is a kind of systemic problem in the agency where you identify either a significant set of concerns about excessive use of force, improper stops, searches, frisks, other concerns, particularly a review of racial discrimination and racial disparities in terms of how the different communities in the city or the jurisdiction are being policed. So when an investigation, a pattern of practice investigation is started, essentially it runs as follows. The first thing that happens is the Justice Department will come into the city and ask for a significant amount of information from the police department and the city. And it is huge numbers. They will be reviewing use of force investigations. They will be reviewing citizen complaints. They will be reviewing all the data about police stops, frisks, searches. They will look at arrest data and try to examine what were some of the significant misconduct issues in the police department. They will also then, as they're doing now, reaching out to the community, reaching out to organizations, civil rights organizations, and others in the community to get their stories about policing, their experiences. They'll also be sitting down with the police department, with the police unions, to kind of get their perspective. And in most of these cases, there are times where at the end of the investigation, the Justice Department will say, well, we looked at this, but we decided, we determined that there wasn't really a significant pattern of unconstitutional behavior. But I will tell you, at least for the larger jurisdictions that they have done these investigations, almost all of them have resulted in some kind of resolution, usually a negotiated settlement or a consent decree. And so right now, the Justice Department is in the middle of the investigation. They are meeting with the police department. They are meeting with community members. And they're watching probably a whole lot of body-worn camera videos, which is what I end up doing in New York. And going through a lot of police reports, as I said, arrest reports, stop reports, use of force investigations, citizen complaints. And then they will come to the city to sit down and negotiate over a consent decree. And what we found is that there have been some changes over time in terms of the, what goes into a consent decree, but there generally are a set of provisions that the Justice Department and essentially the policing profession have identified as best practices for police accountability. So there will be changes in use of force policies, there'll be changes in training, there'll be reforms related to searches, stop, question, frisk, and searches. There certainly will be provisions related to how the police department handles mental health issues and the mentally ill. There'll be provisions on accountability and auditing. What kind of work is the police department doing to investigate its uses of force, to investigate citizen complaints? And all of those issues will be negotiated with the city. And in most cases these days, they will then go to a judge and seek a consent decree. part of the consent decrees, generally there'll be a provision where there will be an independent monitor, someone who is not at the Justice Department, someone who's not at the police department, but someone who will essentially be reviewing the reforms and the implementation of reforms and reporting to the court on whether they are, the city is being successful in implementing the reforms. And looking at what are the kind of objective measures? What has happened in terms of uses of force? What has happened in terms of shootings, in terms of citizen complaints, and measuring success? There certainly will be provisions about, in terms of bias-free policing and racial profiling. These days, one significant piece of general reforms at police agencies is body-worn camera videos. So making sure that officers have body-worn cameras, that they're turning them on when they're engaging with citizens, and that there's a review of their videos by the supervisors, by the folks in the police department. So that gives you a general sense of what these investigations look like, and we can talk about kind of the differences in different cities, but at this point, I don't think the Justice Department has yet kind of, one of the things that will happen is they will then come out with a findings report. And this will be a public report that will lay out, here's what we did in our investigation, and here's what we found. And the most recent one has been in Minneapolis and Louisville, and that is what then kind of starts the negotiations to end up with the consent decree. So that's probably what you're looking at. Usually the investigations can take from a year to 18 months. And then you'll get a findings letter, which can often be quite voluminous. And then the negotiations tend to take another 3 months before there's a final resolution.
Thanks, Richard. I'm going to, so in our...
Can I say something? I'm sorry.
Of course, yeah.
I just wanted to add, good people, that for us in Cincinnati, we were just a little bit different. So we were in the negotiating room. Every part and parcel of this agreement, we were part of it because we were the plaintiffs. So we could not be at the table. We have encouraged across the country, whenever I travel and try to talk to communities, I often ask that they figure out and find out ways. And I do believe that this is what the work looks like, to assist people in the communities that don't have the means to get this done. Going through these efforts, losing life, trauma, chaos, responding to that, more trauma, more chaos, more violence, only comes from when systems are not set up to hear the cries of the people. Memphis community needs to be in the room. We made it very clear to our attorneys that our agreement was not going to be done in the back room. It was going to be aired out in the public. Our team was 3-tiered. We were in the negotiating room, we were on the streets, and we were communicating to our people. Because if you don't, you get where you are now. And it's unfair to the process that you're trying to create, to the pathway that you're attempting to get here and it be sabotaged by folk who just don't believe that change should occur. You all still have to fight for that in your circles of influence and wherever you are. And because you don't have it, Richard laid it out, we selected the monitoring team. We read every application. We helped hire the conciliator that worked under the federal judge. When communities are a part of, they own it. And the more people who own it and who become believers of it, then they never stop. And they inspire others to keep the work going. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And in our textbooks when we were kids, you had those little blocks, or you pull out like the learning from the section of the book. I want to just point out a couple of things, just really quick point of privilege here. The 3 things that the Department of Justice told us that they were going to look into in July are use of force, number 1, stops, searches, and arrests, Right, so all the body-worn camera footage that they're looking at these three things: use of force, stop, searches, and arrests, and discriminatory policing, disparate treatment of people based on skin color. So those are the three things they've already told us. And I also want to point out that we hear a lot about Tyree Nichols, we hear a lot about the U.S. Attorney, we hear a lot about these issues in the news, even over the past few days. And I want to make the point that this pattern or practice investigation is separate. It's separate from the state criminal charges against the former police officers. It's separate from the federal criminal charges against the former police officers. So, and it's also separate from, we heard a little bit, especially at the beginning when this was announced, that there's this COPS program that Richard has referenced a couple of times. The city was already sort of enrolled in that program. This is separate from that. So just when you think about a pattern or practice investigation, just think about those things, if you will. And Iris, I want to come right back to you. You mentioned that you've been in Cincinnati for 8 or 9 mayors you can't even remember. Memphis is at a juncture. We are about to swear in a new mayor in early January, presumably before this report, results of the investigation are told to us. So tell us about some of maybe the frustrations you had as a community over the course of 20 plus years, and what the community did about it. Just walk us through that if you can.
Well, the community's tenacity is the key. And we knew that we were only standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. And so we were pretty smart students of our history. We didn't know it, but actually liked our city. I remember saying it to Reverend Lynch, our past president of the Cincinnati Black United Front. I said, why don't I love Cincinnati like folk love Narlands and other folk love their town? He said, you do, or you wouldn't fight so hard. I said, well, daggone, I really would like to feel that. Love come back to me. So, Josh, your question around the Cincinnati Black United Front and its particular work and role in the community, and I'm just going to venture off just a little bit because the community is often left out. And I'm going to keep saying that to you all, time and time and time again. The community is often left out. And even as we talk about pattern and practices and what the DOJ is coming in, who's communicating that to the community? Before you can get to trust, you got to build some hope and assurances that measures are going to be put in place, and that's where you all come into play. What was your question? Tell me just one more time.
I think we want to hear, or I want to hear, more about the frustrations. I mean, 8 or 9 mayors is a lot. So we've had all this happen during,
On election day, he asked me a question about politicians. I'm sorry, I forgot about them. Go ahead. It's very
Oh, it is election day in Ohio. That's right. That's right. And so we're moving into a different mayoral administration. You've seen that happen many, many times through the course of this effort, this DOJ involvement, the community-led involvement. What are the frustrations of changing leadership? What do you want to see out of new leadership? What can we hope for from our new administration?
Thanks for bringing me back. That's an important question.
That's what I'm here for.
Because based on your civics, your structure of your government here, it will determine how the work is institutionalized into the fabric. Because penetrating and changing cultures isn't easy. Whether it's police culture or community culture, whether if it's racist culture, whether it's biased, whatever it is, it's just not easy. So when we're talking about people on their jobs, the Cincinnati Black United Front then was very clear about what we were talking about, right? We were talking about people getting our tax dollar to do a job. Mm-hmm. So the frustration was after you learn that the cycle will continue, somebody's going to run for these positions. But if you keep educating and talking to community, guess what happens? They demand that the people that are running run for the right things. There hasn't been a person run for office that does not say they support the collaborative agreement and its provisions in the work. There's not a person that's going to run for even school board that's going to mention this work and not talk about Iris Roley and the Cincinnati Black United Front. There are not many people that you can talk to in the city of Cincinnati. They may not know all the provisions, but they know there's a collaborative agreement. Mm-hmm. Now, that's because the community did the work. That's because we talk about it weekly. We talk about it all the time. We never let it go. I was on the radio talking about it today because there's still people who believe that Iris Roley is problematic to policing. We still have that. We still have a police union president that wants to continue to be very extreme with me, often threatening. And what does that do? It tears away at the work. But you know that somebody else is coming in, and you keep working. Institutionalizing the change, the more you can codify, the more you can institutionalize the ownership, who is going to be responsible in the community space of holding people accountable as it relates to whatever findings, and then the work product that comes out of that findings from the DOJ. Who is that? And once you determine, you stop being frustrated, because you can then say to people, now last year, in the year of 2020, CPD arrested 11,000 people. For the first time in 50 years, we saw a reduction of arrests by 50%. Uses of force have gone down by 64%. So if you're running, what people will now say to folk who are running in office, I don't have to say it anymore, because the proof is in the pudding. You say you support the collaborative agreement. Will you, and this is going to be a question for Richard Jerome about citizen oversight, do you support the Citizen Complaint Authority in the city of Cincinnati? How are you going to ensure that the refresh goals are met? Do you support Iris Roley in her position? I don't have to say it. The community will say it for you. It's extremely frustrating, but you got to stick to your guns. They have an agenda, and so do you. The fortunate part about the Cincinnati Black United Front, I think, is we cared more about the city of Cincinnati, because the agreement has fundamentally changed the way Cincinnati does business because of the collaborative agreement.
Excellent,
So
excellent.
I'm frustrated, but
Yeah, but it takes on a life of its own, and it becomes, as you said, part of the fabric.
especially to those who change policies to make it impossible to reduce crime. So Ohio is now a constitutional carry state. So when we talk about crime, since we become that, youth gun violence has shot up by 200%. We have not begun to close the loopholes in gun shows. We do not talk about gun safety. We don't require that you get a permit and/or training, and everybody's got guns.
Yeah. I want to spend, we don't have too awful long to spend together. I want to get you guys questions as promised. I want to give Richard a chance to talk about best practices, but first I want to throw it to Just City board member Natalie McKinney, who signaled that she had a question.
I want to be clear, I'm Natalie McKinney. I'm the executive director, co-founder of Whole Child Strategies, and one of Just City's.
And I called you who earlier?
Amber and then April. But that's fine, that's how you remember me. I like Amber. The question I have is about community. Both of you have said community needs to be involved. I want you to be clear about what you mean and how you define community. Because here in Memphis, in the 20 years I've been here, there are different definitions of community. And sometimes that means it's the business community, sometimes that means it's the philanthropic community, sometimes that means it's the nonprofit organization community. I want you to be very clear about what you mean by community.
Natalie?
Not me, I know.
Yes, ma'am. So let me say this to you, because not only is the Cincinnati Black United Front one of the most smartest groups of people in the whole world, our attorneys were extremely brilliant as legal strategists and helping us define what community was, right? Now, when I say community, the very first line of the federal document that has that C-00239876349. I think I know the number to the class. I don't. I'm just messing with y'all.
You're just saying number.
The first line reads, the Cincinnati Black United Front in the ACLU of Ohio. The next important part of that first page is the class that reads all African Americans and or Black people who are perceived as such, who live and walk on the streets and thoroughfares of the city of Cincinnati and who come into contact with Cincinnati PD and or their agents. For us, that's the community. But what we did do in the early stages, once we got all of the pieces of the first part of the puzzle together, is that we created an 8 different stakeholder groups. And so that included everybody, even the police and their families. Everybody got a chance to come to the table, from the youth to LGBTQIA, to the business, to the non-business, to Black folks having their own, because oftentimes we're lumped in with everybody else, right? To the nonprofits, for-profits, and to the religious. Everybody got a day, and we asked the same question of everybody. And then we put all of the answers up on the grid, Natalie. You know what we almost all said unanimously? We all want to be safe, and we all want to go home. So we circumvented the thought of people saying you left us out, because we knew that that's what they were going to say, because we were talking about changing policing for Black people in the city of Cincinnati. And that's difficult for some people to digest. So we were smart about how we got at it. We were very smart. We included people on the front end. So the back end, the work, the product, the expansion, as Mr. Jerome told you, we were going for it. We still go for it. So that's what I mean by community. So we got all of everybody's say, but the driving force is the Black community. And that is it. Now, I don't care about your social economic status or what high school you went to, because we do that in Cincinnati. You know, I don't care about who you're married to. If you're Black and you want to do some work, come see me around the reforms and the refresh of the agreement. But we held people accountable, Natalie, more specifically the Cincinnati Black United Front. We were the drivers of it, and we still are driving and teaching young folks how to be the drivers and free thinkers of what policing should be in the city of Cincinnati.
So I hear your definition. So, Mr. Jerome, I'd like to hear yours, because I think you said that DOJ is here and they've already started some. Did I hear that correctly?
I believe they have.
Okay.
So I don't know which organizations they've met with. I don't know what kinds of focus groups they've put together. But here's an interesting thing just in terms of NYPD, for example, in New York City. There was a real concern. New York City's a big place, and there wasn't a whole lot of public awareness of what the monitor was and what the various stop and frisk cases meant. And the court decided, well, we're going to go ahead and appoint a community liaison. And the main focus there for the community liaison is to reach out to individuals, particularly those most impacted by policing. And really here in New York, we're talking about young Black and Hispanic, mostly men, but women as well, to try to find folks and get their voices, their experiences, their perspective on has policing changed since the reforms have been put in place, and try to get their voices to basically be communicated to the monitor so that when we make an assessment of has policing changed, has these reforms been put in place, we're also kind of hearing from not just the folks who will come to a community council meeting, and not just from the data that we get from the police department or the body-worn camera videos, but as much as we can, the voices of folks in the community.
What's your definition of community?
My definition, all of those things.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also,
Literally all of those things that
Yeah.
you talked about.
Right.
I think that the interesting thing about how you all entered into this relationship is that you were already organized around that, and you had filed a lawsuit. That is not what has happened here. So it's going to be a little different entryway into making sure that you are talking to the community and making sure that you have all of the appropriate stakeholders around the table. We cannot do the work without having the people who are impacted by it being there. I don't say at the table, I say making the menu. Because
That's right.
most of the time when you get to the table, it's already set.
It's already said.
So it's about, we need to have them, so DOJ, I don't know if you're still, do you have anything to do with that? Really needs to think about how do I get all of those stakeholders in making the menu before they go out and have all these conversations. And you really don't know who you're having conversations with and how it's impacting. So that is my thought around that.
and I think there's always going to be a lot of different perspectives. Residents in Memphis are going to have different views about what policing should look like. And all of that needs to be kind of incorporated into how do we define, what is good policing, and how do we measure, police officers' behavior, and how do we define what good policing is. You want to make sure that there is a measure of kind of community perspective in terms of what they are looking for, in terms of what they think good policing is. I want to also go back to a quick question that you raised about, we've got a new mayor coming in, and I think there's a big piece about leadership in terms of being successful, both in terms of a pattern of practice resolution and a consent decree, but just generally in terms of cultural change and organizational change and really moving things forward in terms of better policing in a city. And a lot of it depends on kind of the leadership of the mayor, certainly the police department, the police executive, the police chief is going to set the tone for what he or she is looking for in terms of how they're going to police. A big issue is kind of what strategies are you going to use for crime prevention and particularly addressing violent crime. And I think that was one of the more interesting things about Cincinnati. Actually, two things first. One is the collaborative agreement. The main provision in the collaborative agreement was that the police department's strategy for addressing crime and disorder was going to be community problem-oriented policing. Basically, using data and information about problem solving and problem-oriented policing as opposed to the kind of prior tactics, which were essentially saturation patrol. Let's just send out as many officers as we can to high crime neighborhoods and make as many arrests as possible. And that did change eventually. And one of the interesting things is we initially had a police chief whose first reaction to the consent decree and the collaborative agreement was, I didn't sign that. The mayor might have signed that, but I didn't sign that. And there was about a 2-year period where there was significant obstruction and and a lot of police departments think, well, maybe if we just hold our nose for long enough, the monitor will go away, the judge will go away, and then we can get back to business.
Wait, but you forgot to say that the community will go away. And so you see how easy it is to say that. Because the community is what built this in Cincinnati. One of the things that I often say, and I used to ask for forgiveness, but I don't anymore, is to allow folk to know that stepping on people's sacrifice ain't cool. It just ain't cool. This has not been easy. We had our child taken away from us because we were very active in this work. We lost a cousin to the University Police Department while trying to reform our city's police department. People who are rounded up on stop and frisk and what we call in Cincinnati the jump out boys and vortex and all of these types of strategies that come because we forget why we got here. We got here because of police violence. Now that if you're lucky enough and courageous enough to deal with public safety while you're trying to get police accountability, then you're gonna move the needle. So when Josh asked me, and I apologize, y'all, because I've been in this space for a while, and so a lot happens on a daily basis. My brain can't even hold it. I'm looking at my husband like, did I forget something? He's trying to tell me. But the daily work, even at the same time of trying to roll out processes from a consent decree, is still happening. So things are still going on every day. It doesn't just become about that. So you can't leave us out, even in the slightest way, or not unmeaning. I didn't mean to say that way. Because if we don't, and if we're not engaged, because if there weren't people like Iris at the table, it could have easily gone backward. And then all of the work and time and tax dollar and debt. I promise families change. And I don't know about folk in Memphis, but I think y'all mean it because y'all here. We have to be intentional about what we say and what we do. If there were not the Black community in the city of Cincinnati, there would be no collaborative agreement. Of course, Natalie, the community changes depending on the subject and where you are in the process. Because everybody really does belong to the community. They just act like they don't need to be in mine. Right? They can't come to the barbecue. You know what I'm saying? But eventually, all of these tables are set so you can get to the goal. And if there are people at the table who don't work, the people who are in control of those people need to be held accountable and responsible. That can become frustration of politicians and when they roll in, because people roll in and things change. If it were not for the community, we wouldn't have community private policing. We wouldn't be where we were in the city of Cincinnati, because people come in with their own ideas and they have constituencies. The other group of people that you need to really be mindful, and I'm sorry if I'm pointing my finger, I don't like it. Excuse me, I'm serious now, is the business community. They play a huge role in what decisions are being made in the city. It's not just the elected officials. So having relationships with them matter. And we had great relationships with our business community. They actually became part of the team. They lent themselves to community to help us figure out, how do we get these dashboards? How do we look at Six Sigma? How do we take Sarah, our problem-solving tool, and exacerbate that? How do we not become perpetuators of bad policing by calling the police on kids instead of getting our butts out there figuring out what's wrong in the first daggone place? I just had that happen last year with young black babies selling water. Somebody called the police on them. I had to go rescue the babies and create a whole entrepreneur program for them because police were behaving poorly.
Iris, could you talk in the microphone?
And
Did I put it down?
and can I put a marker on the time and say that we have time for 2 questions? I want 1 question for Iris and 1 question for Richard. Go. Anna?
So,
Who's the question for?
I'm not sure.
Uh-oh. Well.
One of them wants to answer it. So, well, maybe, so Iris, you said that one of the most important inflection points or I interpreted one of the more important inflection points in engaging the community was during the negotiation of this consent decree and the collaborative agreement. Who can be held accountable for making sure that happens in our place when our community is not necessarily the plaintiff in this process that's happening right now?
That's a great question, and I thought Richard may have wanted to go there from the Department of Justice too, because they can actually do something inside of what they write. I think your city can do something as well, depending on if your government can execute, but I'm gonna pass the mic if you don't mind.
I think that's a challenge because I think for a long time, the Justice Department kind of took the position of, well, we represent the community, and so we're negotiating on behalf of the community. I think they have kind of broadened their view over the past couple of years, and certainly I've talked to some of the attorneys who are in the special litigation section, who, that's the unit within the Civil Rights Division that is doing the investigation, and they are looking for, contacts in the community. I think the challenge will be, how do I get a seat at the table? There's no doubt that the Justice Department will be looking to hear from community members about what they think should be in a consent decree, where they think the problems are with with policing in Memphis. But, I think Iris's point would be, well, the community have to say, no, we need to be at the table. We need to be part of these discussions.
Somebody has to step up and say that they're going to own this process for the community so that it resides in the community. And you can either, I was hoping that the DOJ would say that that can be part of their pattern. Let's see how this works in the beginning. And or once the monitoring team comes, that can be part of the recommendations or the findings, that in order for this work to sustain itself, in order for this work to really be about what the people need, what they deserve, then you have to have some type of community at the table. It is just critical. We had a radio show And we would read every week what we negotiated. Every week to the community. We even interpreted it for the blind and hearing impaired so that people could understand. And we don't have a budget. We just had a will to get something done for our children and our grandchildren. So some organization has to own it and push your legislators, push your mayor, push these organizations that are out here having these conversations. What more are you going to do? Because it's not just for the time that the monitoring team and the DOJ is in here, in your city. They won't be here forever. Our agreement, federal oversight in Cincinnati ended in the year of 2008. It is the year of 2023, and we're still at the table. So someone has to own it.
One more question?
Bigly.
Yes, sir.
Hi. So, first of all, I want to thank you both for coming down here. It's very, very informative. And I was actually got to sit on some of those meetings as a note taker and employed with the community. And I will say that, first of all, they need more note takers. But second of all, it's just very great to be able to hear the voices of people who are actually affected. And but since then, I've been a public defender, and I've seen countless situations that you talked about, just brutality and kids being bit by dogs, people being beat up in schools. I've worked with juveniles and adults, and even thinking about it now just brings emotions to me and all the trauma that the community goes through that people don't see or care about. My question is, how, with the world even becoming more divided, with people going into gated communities and trying to shut out the rest of the community as a whole, especially the community that is most affected by policing, how do we talk to people about who don't want who don't want you in the community? How do you talk to them in order to bring them back to the table? Because the problems are still going to exist and they're still going to go on, but how do you get people with your power to come to the table and actually hear what you and hear your voice? And then I have a second question, just for throwing there. What were your goals and how do you measure them in terms of Cincinnati?
I'm going to quickly talk a little bit about the first, and I'll pass it on to Iris for the second. I think, how do you get folks who maybe are, not in downtown Memphis or, in the high crime neighborhoods to be interested in this issue and have a stake in trying to improve policing? And I think the answer is that there are ways to achieve public safety with the police, with the community, that don't mirror kind of many of the kind of old visions or versions of policing that, whether it's the specialized units that are going to be essentially going in unmarked cars and just, doing jump outs, there are better ways to address public safety and to reduce violent crime using a whole variety of evidence-based practices. And that means, for example, including community-based organizations, whether it's violence interrupters or even in terms of hotspot policing, which there has been a lot of research that says that actually can be very helpful. But there's also research that shows it's even better if, instead of just going, and going to hotspots and making arrests, using, kind of smarter ways to address some of the underlying problems in the community. And there's a kind of an approach called procedural justice, which really is all about how officers interact with citizens. And, basically, if you are kind of giving more respect, if you are listening, even when persons are arrested, if they feel like they've had kind of a fair interaction with the police, it makes a difference. And there's been remarkable research that shows that if police officers and police departments are actually trained in procedural justice, that improves public safety, that you end up with better outcomes in terms of crime rates. So I think a lot of the real goal here is to make sure that there is, a push for smarter policing that ends up with both public safety and accountability.
So when you asked me that question, it triggered me to talk about something that just happened in the city of Cincinnati, and I think we both were about ready to cry. Because as you talk about children, so we just experienced an 11-year-old being shot and killed in the city of Cincinnati on Friday. And 4 other young children were shot also. But they survived. The 11-year-old died. Here is how you utilize the processes that are put in place to achieve the goal of having equitable, transparent, and accountable policing while trying to achieve the goals of public safety. Because we've been at it for 20 plus years, and because we will never stop saying, use SARE, use problem solving in your strategies and your tactics, we refuse to allow you to stray away. We refuse, even though they do sometimes, don't allow communities to define what the problem is, because SARE is an acronym. And even sometimes when communities refuse to come in the room. But because we have all pushed this and we've all said it, and we can see it in real time now, we can identify a result of utilizing it in a real way for people, then the reaction wasn't just, we need to go get 2,000 more police. The call to action was, we really need to step up our game on the state of Ohio and figure out how children are able to get a hold of a semi-automatic weapon, why it is okay with America that everybody has 3 guns to every 1 person, and why the flow of them is more frequent than food. In the state of Ohio, we have 11 manufacturers who produce guns. They have qualified immunity for them that protect them as well. We also have a state report card on our educational system that consistently has given us Fs in critical areas like reading, comprehension, math, all of these things that it takes to build a society of productive citizens. But because inside of our school system, there are some of us that believe that because it's 77% African Americans, who cares? The state has told us that it's unconstitutional the way that the schools are funded in Cincinnati, but who cares? Business goes on as usual. So the unfortunate part of the story that I just told you is that a baby died. And it looks like, and I'm not for certain, that it could have been another kid that shot. That's society's problem. These are our issues. Because our children are now driven by social media that we have put in place for them. They didn't create it. They're not making money off of it. They're in spaces now where we just hate each other just on sight. And we're okay with people who would just kill on the street, creating and causing more chaos and mayhem. So that's how I, in the roughest time of a day, and as being a mother and a grandmother, can say to you that time will help bring those people to the table. And oftentimes, when people don't come to the table, it's okay, because some of them don't need to come no way. And that's the truth. So, but time, consistency, commitment to the work, and those who believe around you will be drawn to you. Don't let anybody take your work, your passion. Don't let anybody steal it because they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. We have to. If not, I don't know what we're telling our children. The hope that we're looking for, we need to find, because we need to give it to them. So that's what I can tell you. That's my experience is over time, because we will not allow it to die and go away and allow them to just politic us out or the business community say that's not sexy, we need another acronym for something. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you have your ebbs and flows. But just stay at it and don't let anybody steal it and take it from you.
Thank you, Iris. Thank you, Richard. It was my distinct privilege to share the stage with these two. I think we should all remember that we are privileged to be in this room, to hear this. And it was, I think, for me, very, very useful to look ahead at what we've got to do as a community. But there are people who won't see the inside of this room, right? Who aren't privileged to hear this story. Every single one of us deserves safety. Every single one of us deserves fairness and dignity in the way that we produce these systems of safety. And so as you leave here, remember that this is something we all deserve. Every single person you pass on your way home today deserves the kind of dignity that we've seen on this stage, the kind of professionalism we've seen on this stage, the kind of expectation for excellence that I hope our community can achieve when it comes to policing and public safety. So join me in thanking these guys. Thank you all. Thank you all so much for coming. Thanks again to the Community Foundation for hosting Just City and for hosting this conversation. I'll hang around. If you have any follow-up, if you want any information to follow up this conversation, I have plenty. So reach out to Just City and we can fill your inbox with more information on these topics at any time. So thanks again.